This is Patrick McCarthy reporting with Tri-Cities Community Television. We're again back in our mobile studios in Lee Square in Port Coquitlam. And today we have a very special guest. Actually, I'm very excited about this guest. Our guests are always great, but sometimes who can say we have a dungeon master in the house? And today we have Craig Chapman, who is the dungeon master. So Craig, thank you much for coming into the studios.
My pleasure.
Now, I think of a dungeon master, and then people out there being, what the heck is Pat talking about? So explain to folks what it is to be a dungeon master and what game we're kind of talking about.
Absolutely. I guess the quickest way to explain it is that I'm an improvising storyteller. So I get content, I build off of the content that's given to me by my crowd, my audience, my players, and I work with that content to build a story that is ongoing and can last, anywhere from a single day to years or decades longer, and turn that into a game, an interactive story. It's like those old choose your own adventure books, but with improv and in person.
Yeah, and I guess for those of us, most people have a kind of experience with Dungeons and Dragons from Stranger Things. The kids were playing that game down the basement, and for I'm an older person, so I grew up in the '80s where it was sort of the beginning of Dungeons and Dragons. But at the same time, it's like I didn't think it would ever be this crazy. And to me, you are in a sense a professional dungeon master. People can engage your services to run games for them, and just how does that feel to be a professional dungeon master? And kind of how do people have fun with this whole process that we're talking about?
I pinch myself sometimes, and I'm still not entirely convinced that I'm awake because it's a dream come true. If you had told me 5 years ago even that I was going to be doing this, I would not have believed it. It was something that just sort of evolved out of an increasing desire on the behalf of the community for me to run more and more and more games. I eventually said, hey, I have a job, I could only run so many, and people said, well, why don't you charge? And I figured, okay, well, if that's where this is going to go, then I could at least run it as a little side hustle, a bit of extra money on the side. It feels amazing. I've turned it from that side hustle into a full-time plus job. I work incredibly long weeks, as I'm sure most small business owners are aware. It's like you start the business, but only half of the work you're doing is actually in person with the actual business. It's administration behind the scenes, it's bureaucracy, it's paperwork, it's so many extra things. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. I love the community that I've got. I really do think of it not just as a bunch of clients, but as a community, and I feel like that's the way people think of it as well, right? I initially started when I was first running professionally. I would come into games and try and be professional because I figured, hey, people are paying for me, that's what I should be doing, right? And I still take an element of that with me, but what I've realized over time is that when people are paying for me to come and run games for them, they don't just want me to be there as this very tight professional. They want somebody who's there to make them laugh and who's going to laugh along with them and tell a collaborative story, because really it is a collaborative thing. It's not just me talking to them, it's me working with them to make the world.
Yeah, and I think you hit the key there. The key things that most people realize is that it's in your mind. Mm-hmm. You're using when you say the world, there's rules of this world, and you can create the reality of that. But I think the amazing part is that you feel you can go anywhere. In your mind, you can. And the Dungeon Master, though, is the guide. Even though you feel like you can go anywhere, but you are really creating that world of reality. And so it is a lot of work. When you play games. So really, give us a sense of the amount of the worlds that you create and sort of and the effort it takes to do that.
Well, I do extensive amounts of prep work for every single game I run. If I was to pull open my Google Drive right now, cloud files are so important because I've lost way too many things to being saved on solid state. But if I was to pull open my drive and just go looking through all of the work that I've done, every single adventure I run is at minimum 3 pages of preparation, three full pages of preparation, size 11 font, all that jazz. My English teacher would probably be very happy. But that's one adventure. I have got, in just my public drop-in games alone, over 364 separate adventures. I never run the same one twice. I know that some DMs do, DM being short for Dungeon Master. It's just easy shorthand for it. But I get bored if I have to do that. So I write everything fresh, and 3 pages is like my minimum. So some are 6, some are 7, some are 10 if they're a particularly extensive adventure. What that means is I am going to be running a 4-hour game, or a little bit less sometimes. It's 4 hours is the standard, but it's what people have time for. And I'm probably going to do an hour and a half to 2 hours of just writing as prep. And that doesn't include things like building terrain, or painting miniatures, or any of the other setup that I have to do just to make the game work. Really, like a single 4-hour period of gaming can easily require 3 or 4 hours of prep, right? And you put so much into it, and you get that much out of it, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to, but you can put as much in as you want.
And the thing is, though, if you look at this, in the '80s, it was a bunch of people, mostly guys, in a basement, inventing the rules as they went along.
Yeah.
But now a lot of the rules of Dungeons and Dragons is kind of like related to how people play these single role player games. The programmers of the world are using the same metrics, but at the same time, in the digital world, there's something magical about this theater of the mind where you're kind of connecting with people. And so you've got some big companies that are really using this as a way to build teams within their.
Absolutely.
So it gives a sense of, from a business perspective of some of the customers you've worked with and what's the value.
Sure, yeah. From a business perspective, a lot of what I do tends to be after hours. I'm open to working during typical business hours, but a lot of the time what I get is people engaging after work. So employees willingly staying on in the building when they're done work and hanging out for 4 or more hours, team building, working together, talking, laughing, making connections and bonds. And those things go beyond just your typical, hey, let's go grab a beer, right? Grabbing a beer, you don't learn as much about the way somebody thinks and the way they solve problems. You don't engage and get to know the person. You're not stuck sitting around a table with them for 4 hours and sort of just being forced to work together. By choice, because they're choosing to be there, but it's this wonderful team building opportunity in a really creative way that you can't easily get even by going out and doing something physical, right? It's important to exercise and to go out and do those things as well, but your mental health and your mental acuity and your ability to think on the spot and improvise and come up with new creative solutions, that is priceless.
Yeah, and also I think it's kind of when you play the game, as you said, if you have voice, if you have ability to make voices, or you can watch other players. You're not playing; you're entertaining each other, which is sort of rare in today's world. You're always our ability to entertain each other has gone away. So the Dungeon Master, obviously the biggest job of all, but at the same time, the adventure gets better if more characters become those characters. And I know for me, sometimes if you play certain rogue characters and people think, oh, that was terrible. It's not me, it's this character. But sometimes people start to see you as the character, or so it is pretty magical moments that are happening there.
Oh yeah. When you've been playing for 3 or 4 hours, sometimes you just hit this point where you click and you're talking to somebody and you realize you're not talking as yourself. You are entirely in your character's own head. You're solving the problem the way the character would, and you're engaged in this incredible, intense emotional moment. I ran a game just the other day, last Friday, and I had 4 of the players crying at the table.
Yeah.
Just because of the emotional impact of what they were doing, right?
Did one of them die?
No, actually, no. But they
can die. Of course.
No. They can.
Yes,
it does happen.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, no, wait. No, somebody did, but that wasn't the cause of the tears.
Yeah.
But they had this moment where they were engaged in this very pivotal storytelling scene, and somebody had to interact with a character they didn't expect to interact with, a younger child that just was very sad to see them going. And the way it all played out, I had one of the players stop and look at somebody else across the table and break character and say, "Are you okay?" And everybody was tearing up. And you get beautiful moments like that all the time, right?
So the only thing I'd say, the research I've looked at, I talked about earlier about, the 80s in a basement, a bunch of folks, kids playing, mostly guys, like we saw in Stranger Things. But if you go online, it is true theater. It is performance. it's performance art,
Yeah.
and you're seeing people who are male, female characters, or just, everybody seems to be having a great time, even in large theaters.
Yeah.
Like, where is this going? Like, where do you think this is going?
God, I don't know. Honestly, I couldn't tell you. There are so many ways it could go, so many places it could go. I don't see it going anywhere but up as a medium, right? Dungeons and Dragons is fantastic. It's phenomenal. But once people have been playing it for a while, they realize, oh, wait, there's all these other systems out there. There's all these other things, right? When you think of Dungeons and Dragons, you think of Stranger Things, you think of a bunch of people throwing dice around, killing monsters, laughing, having a good time, stealing treasure, all that sort of stuff. But there are so many other systems out there to emulate all manner of things. To emulate, there's a really good one called Blades in the Dark, where you're all secret agents, and it's all sort of James Bond-esque, and you get engaged in high-speed chases, and it's all about stopping other spies and all these sorts of things. And God, I could go forever about it. There's so many, but more than that, I just see it building communities. That's the biggest part of it for me. I see it in larger communities and smaller communities. I see it in theaters, online. I see it bringing people together, and people from very diverse backgrounds that might otherwise never have met, because we do tend to really close off sometimes. And having this opportunity, this medium to bring together such a diverse and wide range of people, it's a rare and unique thing.
Yeah, I think for me, I say before we close, for me, like I said, now, I'm 50 plus playing with my 20-year-old, it's sort of, it's very hard sometimes to connect at that level, but you have this medium that is memory for me, but it's also, it's kind of a new adventure for everybody. So anything I haven't asked that you think that people need to know, or you'd like to pass on to the folks out there?
Really just play Dungeons and Dragons, right? At the end of the day, I have people saying, oh, I would never pay to play Dungeons and Dragons. That's ridiculous. To them, I say, okay, you know what? Go ahead. Play more Dungeons and Dragons. I don't care, right? Like, I am just happy to see more people playing it and more communities forming and more people being introduced to it. If that means that this wonderful opportunity that I've had ends up combusting because everybody decides to just start running their own games, I'm okay with that, so long as the communities stay together, right? I'm just incredibly, incredibly happy to see it growing and to see so many people from so many different backgrounds forming friendships that really, really are so far beyond surface level.
Well, thank you very much for coming in. I know most people out there are thinking, what the heck is he talking about, this Dungeons and Dragons stuff? But again, to me, it's like where art has come together, and you have somebody who loves something, and it's a theater of the mind, and now it is a career. So for that, I thank you for that. And for those folks out there who have no idea what we're talking about, Dungeons and Dragons is definitely a game you play in your mind with a few tools to kind of get you the base rules. But Dungeon Masters today are becoming the new internet stars. If you go online, you'll see a whole bunch of folks doing podcasts, doing live performances. They are probably in the basement many years ago, and now they're in the main light. So check it out. Obviously, go on the internet, check out Dungeons and Dragons, and if you might be playing it at home, or hire Craig here, and he can come to your house and set one off for you. So again, this is Patrick McCarthy reporting with Tri-Cities Community Television. Thank you very much for watching.